Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you are here today to join us for this webinar where we will explore how you can drive strategic alignment with your project portfolio management program. My name is Mike Verletic, and I'm the president of Enterray Life Sciences Consulting. And I'm excited to be hosting this webinar today with members of the Enterray team and our guest presenter from Gilead Sciences. At Enterray, we've been working with clients for the past 18 years, providing program and project management consulting across a wide range of projects and functions in the life sciences industry, and we look forward to sharing some of that experience with you today. Over the course of the next hour, we'll touch on ways that PPM will increase your productivity, improve your decision-making ability, and help you drive overall success in achieving your strategic objectives. We expect you'll leave this webinar today understanding the critical relationship between your strategy, how you develop your portfolio, and how you execute projects to achieve your strategic vision. To support these goals, we will first provide an overview of PPM and the PPM process, and we'll discuss some of the many benefits of implementing a well-executed PPM program. Second, we'll share a case study detailing the benefits and efficiencies gained at Gilead's biologics manufacturing facility as a result of their PPM implementation. We welcome your questions, so please just simply add them to the Q&A panel, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Ryan Coughlin is Enterray's Senior Director of Operations, heading up our consultant delivery team. Ryan's experience spans over 20 years in both the defense and life sciences industry. During that time, he has led a wide variety of projects with a focus on strategic planning, portfolio program and project management, as well as operations management. Our guest presenter today is Ileana Almaguel. Ileana is the Associate Director of Project Management at Gilead's biologics facility in Oceanside, California. She brings over 15 years experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries. And as you'll hear today, Ileana has spearheaded an effort at Gilead to implement a robust PPM solution as part of her leadership of the site project management office in Oceanside. Now, I'll hand it over to Ryan Coughlin, who will get us started. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for attending today. As Mike stated, I will be leading the first half of this webinar, which is focused on driving strategic alignment with PPM. During my portion, I'll focus on 4 key topics. The first is PPM defined. We'll look at the definition, we'll break it down, and we'll look at key elements individually. Second, we'll look at the relationship between PPM and strategy, which is one of the most important aspects of this whole topic. Third, we'll look at the PPM process, and this is the process for both introducing project portfolio management to your organization as well as maintaining it over time. And then finally, assuming you've implemented a good PPM methodology and it's aligned with your strategic or with your strategy, we'll look at the benefits you can expect to get out of this. So this is the definition of project portfolio management as provided by the Project Management Institute. I said that we would look at key elements of it individually. So the first one is the centralized management of activities. I want to highlight that when we talk about the activities within a portfolio, we're primarily talking about projects and programs. You can have other portfolios incorporated into a portfolio, but it's primarily projects and programs. This is project portfolio management is a centralized management of all these activities. You group these activities into one entity and you start managing them in order to enable your executive leadership team to efficiently make decisions. And the beautiful thing about this is that as they make these decisions, they're looking at everything in one view, in a holistic view. They're making these decisions in relation to the overall organizational goals and objectives, or the strategic goals and objectives. As we look at this definition, there's really 3 layers of things to look at. There's the strategy, which we'll get into in more detail. There's the portfolio, which supports the strategy, and then within the portfolio are the projects and programs. So we'll keep that in mind as we get into further elements of this discussion, and we'll transition now to talking about how the strategy and portfolio are related. I'll start this portion with a couple quotes, one of my favorite from Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So this emphasizes the importance of having some sort of strategy. And I want to highlight that when we talk about a strategy, it does not have to be a fully developed strategic plan. It could be something as simple as a 1 or 2 line vision statement, but as long as it's something that aligns people on a common purpose. So you have your strategy, you have your common purpose, and then you have all these activities that are going to help you achieve your strategic objectives. Key element of portfolio planning is identifying both what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, eliminating those activities that are not offering much benefit to the strategic overall strategy. So this is the planning. This gets into the portfolio planning, and then as you get into portfolio execution, that's where you're actually meshing the strategy, your concept of what you want to do, with reality, which is your what you have for people, time, budget, all those things. So it's meshing your concept of the future state with reality. The bottom line is project portfolio management itself is a bridge between that strategy and implementation. And we'll look at the strategy and portfolio management in a little more detail. We'll look at some visuals here. The first one is as you look at an organization, you have your corporate level strategy. And within that strategy, you're going to have your current operations, which are going to obviously help you achieve your objectives. And then you have all those projects and programs which are directly aligned to helping you achieve your strategic goals and objectives. Those projects and programs can become chaotic, confusing, can be overwhelming at times if you don't have a good method for managing them. That's where you can introduce your portfolio. So this is a view of having a portfolio up at the corporate level. An alternate view is if you have a corporate strategy and you have functional strategies to support that. The functional groups develop either their own strategy or some goals and objectives aligned with the corporate strategy, and then they manage their activities in a portfolio that's made up of their projects and programs, also aligned with their current operations, all in support of their goals and objectives. So this is another view, shows where the portfolio can be embedded into the functional groups. You could actually have a combination of this where you have a corporate level portfolio, you have portfolios at the functional level, and you can even have portfolios down into divisions and lower areas. Bottom line is a portfolio is a great tool to manage when you have multiple activities all in support of common goals and objectives. So going back to this view, I'm going to kind of summarize how all these things are related in those three layers that I talked about before. But you have your corporate, or you have your strategy, which really your desired future state. Your portfolio will help you identify those activities that will get you to that desired future state. So it's doing the right things to get you there. And your project management process in support of your portfolio will make sure that those right things you've chosen to do, you do them in the right way. So that's how these three layers work together. Looking at this in the conceptual level, we'll now transition to how you actually implement and maintain a portfolio within your organization. Portfolio management is a three-phase cyclical process of plan, execute, and realize. You'll see that the green arrow with the execute is much longer than the other two. You'll spend the majority of your time in this phase, although it doesn't mean it's the most important phase, but you will spend the majority of your time in this phase. As you introduce portfolio management to your organization, you start at the plan phase. Key input is the strategy and the strategic objectives, and you start looking at all those activities that could potentially get you to that desired future state. You prioritize those activities, you allocate resources, you budget those, or you budget those, and then you sequence them over time. And then you get into execution. When you get into execution, you need to be ready to monitor, make decisions, and provide guidance in the entire execute phase. Things are going to change very quickly, so that itself, the monitor, decide, and guide, is a cyclical process in and of itself. At the end of this cycle, you get to the realization phase, which is where you take a look back and say, how well did we plan and how well did we manage this portfolio, this cycle of the portfolio? The outcomes of the realization phase, along with the key elements of the strategy, are inputs to your next planning cycle. And then you just go through it again. You plan your portfolio, you execute, and you go through the realize. You keep this is a cyclical process. There's some critical elements associated with it, and these concepts, these critical concepts apply both to the portfolio management methodology as well as the project management process that is in support of it. So some key concepts are both management processes need to be simple, consistent, flexible, and supportable. So simplicity and consistency go hand in hand, but you need to have simple processes that are consistent, because consistent contributes directly to the simplicity, so that the teams who are actually executing all these activities can focus on those tasks that will best achieve strategic objectives, and they're not focused on management tasks. So simplicity and consistency is critical to the efficiency of your portfolio and your project execution. Flexibility is critical to the portfolio management process, because once you plan your portfolio and you get into the execution phase, things are going to change almost immediately. You're going to be introduced to new information, things are going to change, you're going to have to be prepared to reprioritize your activities, reallocate resources, shift budgets, change sequencing, introduce new projects. So the whole process, the whole portfolio management process needs to be flexible to allow for all those options. And then finally, supportable. Obviously, as you plan your portfolio and you manage it through execution, you need to make sure that your plan is supportable by both resources, budget, and time. So this is the conceptual view. Cyclical process keeps repeating itself, but how does it work over time, and how do you introduce a portfolio to your organization? This is the linear view of how this works. You start off in your first cycle of portfolio management, and you look at what projects and what activities you're proposing, and you make decisions on that based off of your strategic objectives. You can approve some projects for immediate execution. You can approve others for delayed execution based off of resource availability or budgeting. And some projects, as you see the example, the fifth one on that list, some projects may not be approved. There is not a significant benefit relative to some of the other opportunities out there. So you go through, you plan, and you start executing. During execution, you're prepared for off-cycle introduction of projects. So you have new projects that are proposed because of changing situations and changing circumstances. You can also modify the execution of the existing projects. If you look at the third one on that list, it's an example of where you've decided to not continue with the project. You've stopped a project before completion because you now, based off of changing situations, you're not really getting the benefit that you anticipated. So you're going through execution, you have projects in execution, you're prepared to introduce new projects, and you get to the realization phase. You make your assessments, and you take those outputs from realization, and those are inputs to your next planning cycle. In the next planning cycle, you're looking at all those ongoing projects, the introduction of new projects. You're looking at all them in relation to your strategy and making sure that they're aligned and prioritized to meet your strategic goals and objectives. And then you're prepared to deal with off-cycle project proposals. So this is just an example of two cycles of portfolio management, but this would be continuous. You would add a third and fourth cycle and continuing to go through this. We've talked about the execute phase and the monitor, decide, and guide it being your most lengthy phase. So there's some critical elements of that. It's really the information flow that is going to really determine your overall success in portfolio management. It's probably the most important aspect of portfolio management is to ensure a continuous communication flow through the monitor, decide, and guide phase. Key players you have here, you have your projects and programs, you have your portfolio, and you have your leadership. The projects and programs are providing inputs and updates to the portfolio team. They're providing it through both formal and informal channels. And the portfolio team is consolidating all that information from all the projects. They're analyzing the information, and they're providing a holistic view of this, usually through the form of some sort of dashboard that the leadership team can look at continuously at any time and make decisions and provide guidance. Those decisions and that guidance is passed back through the portfolio team, who then disseminates it back to the project teams, and outlines how it impacts the changing or the execution of those projects. I mentioned that this is done through both formal and informal channels. The formal channels are routine status updates, and the informal channels are just continuous emails, one-on-one conversations, any informal communication channels all the way up through the portfolio into the leadership team, and then back down through the portfolio and down to the projects and program teams. Critical elements of this are that you have clear communication channels, both formal and informal. You have clear expectations on communications, and you have continuous information flow. This will truly enable successful project portfolio management. So when you have this in place, you've planned your portfolio, it's aligned with your strategy, and you have clear information flow, what benefits can you expect to see from a PPM program? Benefits can really be broken down into two groups: your strategic level benefits and your operational level benefits. Your strategic level benefits for the senior leaders are, first and foremost, the holistic view that we talked about. One snapshot of all the activities that are ongoing, the status of those activities, and their relation to your overall strategic objectives. Once you have that holistic view, it allows the senior leadership team to prioritize activities and then allocate resources, sequence those activities over time, provide budget for those activities, all those things. It really allows them to plan that out appropriately and then manage the execution. It's the timely and efficient executive level decision making. Timely decision making and timely communication of those decisions down to the teams that are executing. There are also significant operational level benefits associated with a successful PPM program implementation. First and foremost is the transparency and visibility. When all the teams can see all the activities that are ongoing and included in the portfolio, they can see how their projects are contributing to the overall strategy and how their projects are related to the other projects. They can see the dependencies, they can understand the importance of their project and where others are dependent upon them completing those projects on time and in budget. So the transparency and visibility, critical. We talked about the simplicity and consistency. That is very important for the operational teams, and it improves their efficiency, their overall efficiency. It supports cross-functional coordination. When you know all the activities that are ongoing and can see, again, the relationship between all the projects, it truly promotes cross-functional coordination. And it also allows for the easy transition from one project to another for any team members. They understand how the process works. They understand where the projects are in relation to their project management lifecycle, and it really promotes that cross-functional coordination. And finally, I've hit on this one quite a bit, but ensures alignment at all levels, all the way from corporate strategy down through the different functional areas and down through the project teams, program teams, the divisions within the functional groups. But it's one of the best methods for ensuring alignment across all different levels. So these are the benefits you can get from successful implementation of a project portfolio management program. We were fortunate enough to partner with Gilead on an effort like this, where we developed a project portfolio management methodology, we piloted it, and then we implemented it at a site. Ileana El Miguel was the champion for this whole effort and really set the tone for all of Gilead on how they can improve the efficiency of their operations and their programs and project management. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ileana.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ryan, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here today to share with you some details on the PPM journey that Gilead Oceanside has been on for the past 3 years. In 2017, we kicked off a project with Entrace Help to design and implement a project and portfolio management process. So a little bit of backstory, having been at Oceanside since 2013 myself in a project management role, I had a pretty good idea where the areas of opportunities were when we embarked on this adventure to implement a PPM process in our site in Oceanside. In addition, we had constant requests from management, project team members, and subject matter experts as well to provide standard tools and templates for them to use in their projects. From a process perspective, however, it was clear to me at the time, based on the comments and requests from the users at Oceanside, we needed more than just standard tools and templates. That would have helped incrementally, but there was more that was needed. We already had buy-in from key stakeholders at the time and SMEs to do something. But I also knew there would be some resistance to implementing an off-the-shelf PPM process that may seem overly complicated to our technical SMEs and leadership at the time. So for that reason, we decided to assemble a team with representatives from every functional area and partnered with Entree to design a process that could deliver to our site's needs without being overly restrictive. We began our project by confirming all of the information we'd heard from Oceanside colleagues, as well as our past experience. So an initial voice of the customer survey in 2017 confirmed we had 3 main areas of opportunity for a PPM implementation to add value to our business. So first, as you see on the slide, limited transparency and visibility. This was happening both vertically and horizontally. Ryan touched on one of the huge benefits of PPM being that ability to have visibility and transparency across the board. We were not there in 2017. So taking this into consideration, we wanted a future state where we had a process that enabled true communication with management and across functions. Also a process that ensured that we were approving the right projects that were supporting our strategy. Second, around planning, we were planning in silos. It was very prevalent at the site at the time. This showed in feedback from our users around receiving last-minute requests from project teams for support, missing documentation or missing key details that ended up causing delays in planning, causing rework, incomplete project risk assessments, etc. And so we looked at all these feedback and we determined like the root cause for that was that we were not planning in a cross-functional manner. And so for a future state, we needed a process that provided holistic and transparent methods to ensure alignment of project goals with strategic objectives. And the third area where we noticed we had a huge opportunity to improve was around consistency in execution. The user's feedback was already alluding to this, but we identified that as a key third requirement, right, that we needed to really deliver to when we designed our process. Okay, so what did we end up implementing? The PPM governance structure that was implemented back in 2017 was quite different from the one that we currently have. The governance structure has evolved over time. Initially, the structure implemented only included the project teams, which is the bottom that you see in purple, and we also had our PRC at the top in green. And in the early phase of our PPM implementation, the Portfolio Review Committee worked very closely with the project teams and project leads. So the PRC approved and monitored all of our site projects. The structure worked well for a time. It was simpler and easier to monitor and allowed project teams and upper management to become familiar with the process at the beginning. We spent time the first year after implementation working out some of the minor details, and we almost immediately began planning for future upgrades to the process as our PPM journey, as we matured in our journey, and also as Oceanside grew and our workload increased. So last year, at the request of upper management, we implemented a process change that resulted in the current structure that you see today, which includes an additional layer for program teams, which now manage the review and approvals of project proposals and all the initial planning for projects. So this structure allows upper management to manage by exception. You see at the top, the portfolio review committee responsibilities, right? Managing by exception, approving budget during our finance cycles, and approving projects only for execution and closure. The rest of the guidance and inputs and the collaboration with the project teams that connects the project team with our site strategy, that is the responsibility of the program teams now. So the program teams approve and reject proposals. They also provide guidance to project teams on a bi-weekly or sometimes weekly basis. They provide oversight to ensure program objectives are being met as well. And then the project teams and project leads, of course, they submit proposals for program team review. They prepare for budget submissions. They manage the routine progress reporting, and they escalate issues as needed to the program teams first. All right, so I'll walk you through our, we call it PPM 2.0. It's our third iteration of our process. We've made minor adjustments as we implemented it, as I mentioned earlier. So our process begins with a project proposal. Anybody at Oceanside is free to submit a project proposal. There's an automated form that the site is trained on that anybody can use to submit a project proposal. This proposal is first reviewed and approved by their direct functional management. This is really helpful. It allows everyone at the site to provide ideas, but also provides us a checkpoint where management can confirm, right? Double check that that proposal is in alignment with our goals before that proposal comes to the program team. You can see the program team diamond in blue there. So once a project proposal is submitted, the program team reviews the project proposal. They either ask questions and send the proposal back, they reject it and archive the proposal for a later time, or they approve the project proposal to move into the planning phase. In the planning phase, a project team will begin to develop their high-level approach. If this is a capital project, that high-level approach does require initial review by PRC before they move on to detailed schedule. And the reason for that being that usually capital projects require some budget and some investment to be able to define their detailed schedule, whereas more OPEX-like projects maybe don't require budget to be able to define their final detailed schedule. So once a team has gone through the planning phase and they have their detailed schedule, they've identified their standardized milestones, and they have an approved charter, the program team has reviewed, and then it goes to the PRC, our portfolio review committee, for final approval ahead of execution. During our planning phase, every project team has dedicated project management support. The project management team usually provides oversight during execution, closure, and realization. And the reason we're able to do that is because the program teams are very hands-on, and they do provide the majority of the oversight and help that the project teams need at that point. So our approach here has been to really focus on the planning phase. And this has really enabled our execution phase to be a lot more consistent and a lot simpler. So a project finishes execution. It goes back to the program team for approval to move into closure. And a final approval once the project has completed is done by the portfolio review committee before archiving the project. So at a high level, this is our process. It's fairly standard compared to most other portfolio processes that you would see industry standard now. But when we did implement in 2017, it was a lot simpler. And so I think that was something that was very key that helped us be successful We didn't try to implement a very complex, all-inclusive PPM process from the very beginning. We started small and improved from there. All right. So portfolio tools and templates. As I mentioned at the beginning, one of the biggest asks from our colleagues was to have standard tools and templates. So just as our PPM governance evolved fairly quickly post-implementation, so did our project management systems. The first version of our PPM process utilized paper forms. And that worked well for the first year. But we started to notice after some time that we were lagging a little bit in reporting. Form submissions were also driving a significant amount of free work for both our project managers and our project leads. So we immediately started to look for an alternative. And so to address this, we executed an improvement project in the second year of our implementation back in 2018 that moved us to Smartsheet, which is a cloud-based project management tool. You see some examples in the screen. And that resulted in some significant improvements in several key areas of our process and the user's experience especially. So first, Smartsheet provides us real-time information. So all of the projects and programs and portfolio information that is housed in Smartsheet is a single source of truth, and it's always updated live. So as project teams are meeting, as project teams are planning, they're making changes and updating their charters and their risks and their constraints and dependencies, as they're updating their timelines. All of that information is real-time updated and available to our project management team so that we can stay on top of the planning process. So this has been a really huge improvement as well, along with the PPM implementation, right? It's driven a significant reduction in meetings, emails, phone calls, just to get project updates or confirm details around dependencies or timeline. It's been just really helpful. Smartsheet also has an application for iPhone and Android. And so most of our project leads and our leadership team members, upper management, they all use the Smartsheet app on their phones to see information on projects that they might need to refresh their memory on details. If they have questions, they're able to do that as well through the Smartsheet app or online in our Smartsheet templates. So it's been a huge benefit. We had a 70 to 90% improvement in on-time reporting from all of our portfolio project teams when we moved to Smartsheet. So that was a huge benefit. And the other piece, also speaking to efficiency that Brian mentioned earlier, we used to be able to, we used to have 1 to 2 projects assigned per project manager, especially projects that are more on the larger side. Now we, for an average medium-sized projects from 6 months to 6 months to a year, with standard requirements with external vendors, our project managers can oversee anywhere from 6 to 9 projects at a time now. And that's because the standardization of the tools and templates in Smartsheet just really saves a ton of time on the administrative side, and it really allows them to focus on the things that matter a lot more than documentation. So the templates you see on screen are the top 4 that we utilize to govern our portfolio work. On the top left, we have our overall portfolio dashboard. This is the PRC view. The Portfolio Review Committee spends most of their time in that dashboard. Next, on the top right, you see a program dashboard is 1 level down. Each program team has its own program dashboard where they have all of the details and strategic objectives for their program and can manage the program information, their action items, their decision logs, their risks, and can see only the projects that are under their scope. On the bottom right, you see an example of a project dashboard. Each project team has its own dashboard with all of the information that the project team needs to monitor and execute their project in one place. All of the links are in one place, and all of the information in that dashboard is directly linked with the main source of truth of information. And then on the bottom left, you see an example of our detailed timeline. Our detailed timelines are the source of truth for all of the other dashboards, along with about a dozen other templates that are automatically created when a project is approved and are ready for the teams to use immediately. Just a huge benefit. All right, so currently our portfolio looks like this. These are just an example of some of the top things that our upper management keeps an eye on. On the left, you see how we track the distribution of projects that we approve, proposals that come in, projects that we approve for execution, projects we close. And this helps us keep an eye on upcoming workload, and it helps us during balancing and prioritization meetings as well. On the top right is the portfolio composition by program. At Oceanside, we currently, our portfolio is broken up into 6 programs. Development, GMP site capabilities, process technologies, campus infrastructure, pilot plant capabilities, and also platform execution optimization. And we also maintain a project rank list, which changes as new projects are added to the portfolio. And this is one of the things we use the most when, especially now, as we are looking at doing a little bit of revision to our prioritization processes for next year, as the pipeline is really growing and expanding for Gilead Oceanside, and we're going to need to be more selective with the number of projects and the types of projects that we approve for execution, looking at 2021. Okay, so now that I've walked you through our process at a high level, what are some of the key benefits that we've experienced? First and foremost, back in 2017, our site had a strategic objective goal to drive cultural shift in cross-functional ownership. At the time, our project management team believed that establishing a PPM process would contribute to that goal. And 3 years later, we can definitely say, and supported by upper management's input, that implementing a portfolio management process greatly contributed to delivering on this strategic goal for Oceanside. In addition, I've added here on this slide the top 5 benefits that I would say have been the most impactful for us at Oceanside. As you saw in Ryan's presentation, there are a multitude of benefits that PPM can provide. Every implementation, it's maybe a little bit different depending on where the areas of opportunity were for the business. For us, these are the top 5 that to me have been the most impactful, like I said. So first off, we now have an ability to proactively manage projects in alignment with strategy. And so having the business strategy be front and center as we are making decisions at every level of our portfolio management process has been a huge improvement. I cannot overstate this enough. Clear connection between project team execution and company strategy. It enables project team members to engage and participate actively in projects because the ask from management and the value to the business is very clear from the beginning to them. So we experience a lot less, or hardly any really, issues with getting project teams to buy in and to immediately engage in projects once they're assigned to be participants in a project. Also, decisions to put projects on hold, to cancel projects, those decisions happen in a very timely manner without a lot of back and forth and swirl that maybe we used to have before. We have very clear criteria for when projects are not delivering value to the business. And we're able to put projects on hold and cancel them as needed. That used to be a very difficult thing to do before. We had a process. Also this process is very clear to everybody at the site. That makes a big difference. Second, transparency and visibility is driving culture change at our site. This is a little bit difficult to measure, so quantitatively it's hard to express, but there is definitely a sense across the site just from talking to our customers and our management, right? This has had a huge impact. Our PPM process has created an opportunity for other functions to also utilize similar tools and similar templates to manage other types of work at the site. So we see replication of the PPM standard tools and templates in other areas of the business. Portfolio management for our site is defined primarily for cross-functional projects, but we're also seeing departments that are utilizing the same structure to manage their individual projects. Long-term, that drives consistency and it creates a culture where everyone's speaking the same language. And that's been a huge benefit for our site. Third, decision-making authority is at the right level. When we implemented our process initially, the time commitment for our portfolio review committee was much greater. They used to commit 4 to 5 hours a month plus quarterly half-day sessions for portfolio review. And now with the addition of the program teams and with the project leads taking on greater responsibility and accountability for managing their projects with project management support, the time commitment for our upper management team it's much smaller. They currently commit about 1 to 1.5 hours a month to do portfolio review, and that additional time is only required in the event of escalations, which takes me to my next point. We've had a significant reduction in escalations around capital projects, anywhere from 30 to 40% reduction in the last 3 years. And that is a huge number because every time there is an escalation for a capital project, you're talking about a significant impact possibly to scope, the reworking of timelines and budgets and timelines, right? With schedules, with external vendors, that causes a huge amount of rework. And so the fact that we've reduced the number of projects that end up needing to escalate to our portfolio review committee, that has had a huge benefit, created a huge benefit for our site. So the last one that I really wanted to call out because it's the one that I noticed the most, having been at Oceanside for 7.5 years now. Our planning duration has really been cut in half. It used to take a lot longer to plan an average project than it does now. And this caused a lot of problems because you could have a functional area that was very clear that they needed a project executed in order to deliver something to the business. But because the planning process wasn't well planned and well thought out, it was difficult for them to drive that planning process for a project that they would benefit from. Now, because planning is standard and stable and it's everyone's trained on it, we're able to plan projects a lot faster. And that in turn, right, means projects are delivered earlier. So in-service dates for some of our capital projects are much earlier than we would have been able to deliver without our PPM implementation. So these are some of I could talk for a couple of hours on benefits, quantitative and also non-quantitative that we've experienced at Oceanside. But I'll leave you with a couple of impactful comments from our leadership team members about PPM. So first, one of our members, right, has said multiple times now, PPM has been great because we now have visibility to all the projects instead of just a few. And another sentiment that we've heard from multiple members of our upper management team, the PPM process has really transformed the way that we work. So I hope that the details I was able to share with you today have given you an idea, right, and a little glimpse into how PPM implementations can go and the benefits that they can provide. And that is all I have for today. So thank you for your attention and for your attendance. And I think we are moving into Q&A session now.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Ileana. We really appreciate your presentation and sharing the insights into your experience there with your PPM program. We are going to open it up for questions. I know we have a couple that came in. If you'd like to ask a question, please do just go ahead and type it into that Q&A panel and we'll try to get to them here. Just before we jump into questions, just want to let you know if you do want to get more information on how Entree could support your program or your projects at your company, please feel free to reach out to Ashley, Chris, or myself. You can see our contact information on the page. We'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Mike Staudinger, I'm going to bring Mike on to ask a couple of the questions that have come in, and we have about a little less than 10 minutes here before the top of the hour, so we'll try to ask a few here and take as many as we can.
Sure. This first question is for Ileana. To ensure resources are assigned to the most important tasks, do you use this tool only for capital projects or also operational projects?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we manage under our portfolio process. We manage both capital projects and OpEx projects. Any project at Oceanside that is cross-functional, and by cross-functional we mean the requirement for more than one function greater than 10% of their time. Any project that meets that criteria is automatically inducted into our portfolio process. And so that allows us to have some pretty good visibility across the board for projects that people are investing time on. And it really helps our PRC team with balancing and prioritization.
Thank you, Ileana. I have another question for you. How have the conversations with your leadership changed with the implementation of PPM?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk about that quite a bit when I'm just speaking with people about this. We used to have quite a bit of escalation activities happening. Often when we met with upper management, we were really spending more time talking about tactical things, right? How to get projects back on track, or how can upper management, how could they help with additional budget or more tactical activities. And now we spend a lot less time, hardly any time at all really, with upper management talking about actual project execution. We spend a lot more time talking about strategy, process improvements, where our business is headed, and what kind of changes or improvements we might need to make to our PPM process to continue to support the business. And so the conversations have changed dramatically in the last 3 years. Yeah.
Thank you, Ileana. I have a question here for Ryan. How do you maintain consistency and flexibility at the same time?
Consistency is in the management process for both the portfolio and project management. And it is critical for consistency so that the teams, again, the management activities are limited. They don't have to spend all their time on meeting management requirements. They get to focus on those activities associated with their projects that give them strategic success. The flexibility is created through a consistent process. Having it consistent on how you introduce new projects, on how you look at the existing prioritization, the existing resource allocation, and the existing budget, consistent method for looking at all of that and reevaluating and modifying, that's what gives you the flexibility. So the truth is flexibility is achieved through a consistent management process.
Another one for you, Ryan. Can you say more about prioritization? How do you effectively deprioritize work so you can focus on what's important? I guess that could actually be Ileana or Ryan for that question.
I can start, Ileana, and then you can probably add the practical application aspect. But I think how do you prioritize? So first and foremost, again, everything's tied to your strategy. So you look at your strategic objectives and you lay out all the activities that are going to be included in your portfolio. So all the activities being all the projects and programs. You look at all those activities and you do a cost-benefit analysis of those. Basically, how much are they going to contribute to achieving your strategic objectives, and how much is it going to cost in regards to resource, time, and budget. So you do the analysis there, and finally you check dependencies between the activities, and you come out with a prioritized list of activities. Some of those, that's where you can eliminate some of the activities. When you see that they're low on that priority list, and the benefit you're going to get out of them is very small relative to the cost, then you can just eliminate those activities. Little bang for the buck. And you want to go for the ones that have the big bang for the buck. So that's how you prioritize. And then again, you manage that over time, and you're always open to reprioritization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, you know, on the practical side, prioritization is the hardest thing really to do from a PPM perspective. If you don't have a very clear and detailed if you haven't developed detailed and clear criteria for prioritization, it can get a little bit murky with project teams' ability to communicate with the upper management team, right, to explain why their project is important and why it deserves higher priority. So the program teams help with this, but at Oceanside, we started with developing a series of questions that we ask the project lead to answer when they submit a proposal around budget and savings and strategy alignment. And we use that those initial responses to score the project. When the project is done with the detailed planning, we rescore the project, and it ends up in that ranking that I showed in one of the slides. And so we have a pretty good idea of how the projects rank relative to each other. If one of those projects comes up with an escalation and they need more money, usually the program team has some idea of what to do and how important the project is as they're deciding how to shift budget around or adjust scope. But getting the input up front and agreeing as an organization on the criteria that you will use to prioritize is key.
Thank you. One more question. We're just about to wrap up. There's a question on, is PPM applicable and being used in an R&D environment? Ryan, I think I may be able to answer that one.
Yeah, I would argue that PPM is applicable in any environment. It's really in an environment where you have clearly stated goals and objectives, and you have a lot of activities that have been identified to help you meet those goals and objectives. The goals and objectives may be different. The structure of those activities may be different. All those things, but it's at its highest level, conceptual level, it's applicable anywhere. It just organizes. It's a method for organizing activities, making sure that everyone is aware of all the activities, prioritizing those activities, and then assigning your resources appropriately. So I do believe it can be applied anywhere.
And Ileana, I didn't realize I missed on the question. It was actually meant for you. I don't know if you want to expand on what Ryan just said.
This one. Yeah, I mean, my perspective is that PPM is even more important in an R&D environment. I think in an environment where priorities and targets are flexible and changing, it's even more important to have a process that teams can use to communicate with each other effectively and efficiently about changes in prioritization. And having established forums and governance teams to discuss and make decisions, right, about project priorities, it's really critical in an environment where a lot of other things are changing. I think of the PPM process, I often explain it, and Ryan has heard me say that many times, right, in an R&D environment, you are moving very fast sometimes, and things are changing a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty. But if you can introduce some stability into that environment through your PPM implementation, it's like, you know, getting on a motorcycle and running and driving your motorcycle across a bridge. You want to go 100 miles an hour on a road. You want to make sure the road is stable and that you're not going to introduce additional variation and instability when you don't have to. Projects can be run in a very standard way and really provide value in an R&D environment because they bring stability where everything else is changing. And that's very helpful, although it's not always obvious upfront. There's certainly an initial response from R&D teams that, oh, we're very flexible, so we don't need a process. And nothing could be further from the truth, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you again, Ileana. Thank you, Ryan, for your presentations. We're going to go ahead and move to wrapping up. It's at the top of the hour here. So I did want to answer one last question, which was someone was asking if there would be a copy of the slides sent out. And we do plan to send out the recording of the webinar to all of those who have registered and attended. So you should be getting that within the next 24 to 48 hours. And again, please feel free to follow up if you have any questions. If we didn't get to your question in the Q&A session, we will follow up with you directly to answer that and discuss it with you. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ileana. Thank you, Ryan. And we look forward to continuing our relationship going forward. And I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.